Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our 2:15 session here on Tuesday at PDMI East. My name is Tom Hare. I'm the Chief Content Officer of the PDMI, and we're thrilled to have you all here in Miami Beach again for PDMI East. This is our 5th consecutive year at the Eden Rock. We're very thankful for everything they do for us. We're also thankful for all of our speakers, all of our badge holders, and of course all of our sponsors. And our educational session sponsor is Blue Water. They have now sponsored the last 4 or 5 shows as the educational sponsor, so we just like to play their video for them and get things going.
Hey guys, Randy Jackson here.
Welcome to the future of pain relief.
At Tommy John, a lot goes into our underwear before you do.
But now I've found my bubbly side with SodaStream.
Ouch!
Philips Air Fryer is the original and the very best.
Kid Rock!
Hey, why is everybody so loud in infomercials?
But wait, there's more.
Yeah. Woo!
So you can find Blue Water at table 3 up in the meeting hall if you'd like to stop by and say hi. Our session today at 2:15, Audio Marketing Turns Up the Volume, a very creative title that I came up with myself. I did not use AI for that. And we have a great group led by Buck Robinson from Retail+Response. Buck is a member of our Brand Response Council. Buck is a lecturer for PDMIU. We have PDMI University is our continuing education program online, and Buck is one of 4 instructors for our audio program on there. And then joining Buck on stage, we have Irena Cibra from Southern New Hampshire University and William Kuntz from SiriusXM. I'm sure you'll have them introduce themselves, but welcome in, and let's get rolling.
All right, thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We know that it's a lovely afternoon outside, and here you are stuck inside with us, so we apologize, but we'll hopefully make it a good session for you all. What I want to try and focus on today is a little bit less of kind of your traditional audio 101. I think everybody here understands what audio is, and really talk more about it from a performance marketer's perspective of what makes it work, what makes it different, how you should be testing it, what are best practices, what's a realistic testing budget and perspective look like, and how do you measure it. All right, so we're gonna try and get down into the nitty gritty. One of the things that I just also want to encourage is that although a lot of these sessions traditionally have question and answer at the end, if there's a particular subject that we're going into that you would like us to touch on in more depth, please raise your hand. We'll actually go right into the question and answer during the session, because this is about you and about what you get out of it, not what we just sit up here and talk about. So if there's anything that we don't touch on enough that you'd like to have us talk, you can either hold it until the end or during session, but either way, we want to make sure that you walk away from here getting the content that you're looking for to be able to have an appreciation for our medium. All right? So, quick, let's go through our panel. Irena, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Southern New Hampshire, and also your experience in audio.
Sure. My name is Irena Cibra. I am a senior media buyer on a mass media team at Southern New Hampshire University, and my team handles all of the medium that is mass reach, so anything from linear to CTV and most recently podcasting. So that's been my focus for the past 4.5 years of my journey there, a little bit more podcasting more recently.
Excellent. All right, William, why don't you tell us about your role at SiriusXM?
Thank you, Buck. William Kuntz. I have been selling audio for over 20 years, not to date myself here too much. I did 10 years at CBS, and I've been at Pandora SiriusXM for the last 12. Just touching on the progression of it, when I started at Pandora, we sold banner ads, just digital banner ads on the platform. Now it is video, podcasting, audio, just to show the progression in the audio space. And excited to be here with you all, answer many questions, and hopefully move you all towards the power of audio.
Yeah. And just real quickly, my name is Buck Robinson. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Retail+Response. Between my partner and I, we have 50 years of collective experience as an audio-first agency, full-service agency. So we handle everything from creative and media placement to analytics and reporting. We have handled campaigns from dating myself, from P90X, Direct Buy, Navage, most recently Active Liver and Muddy Mats. These are all campaigns that we've been helped build from scratch in the audio space. So first things first, there's really no discussion to be had about whether audio works. It's just how to make it work for you. All right. So there are innumerable brands that have made hundreds of millions of dollars utilizing either traditional radio, podcast, or some combination therein to be able to promote themselves in a performance marketing space. Some of the ones that you recognize here, that is a very small snapshot of a variety of different types of products that work in our space. And as we'll get into in more detail, there is no one size fits all. It's really a very malleable medium that has a lot of different opportunities depending upon what your expectations are and who you're trying to reach. So it's not if radio works or if audio works, but how to make it work for you. I'm going to let William take some of this because a lot of this is based on data that he's been able to compile for us about the level of audience engagement and utilization of audio.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect starting book. Thank you. I think when you look around this room, right, the idea of 4 hours per day being spent with audio seems very large, right? It's hard to sit back and say, hey, how am I possibly spending that much time with audio? And if you look at it from a video standpoint, I don't think anybody thinks they have the time to sit here and watch 4 to 5 hours of video. But when you look back and sort of pull at your day from making breakfast with the family, listening to ESPN radio, throwing on a podcast in the car, listening to music while you're working out, next thing you know, by the time you get to dinner time, you spent 3 or 4 hours with audio. And in a world where we're fighting for eyes and screens, right? If you all look back and look at how you consume media, if we're watching Netflix or I'm watching TV, I'm picking up my phone, I'm doom scrolling, I'm on Instagram, I'm looking for recipes. But audio's had this renaissance because it allows you to have this one-to-one interaction with whoever is consuming that audio. And that's really the progression of where it's gone from being 2 hours a day when I started at Pandora in 2014 to 4 and likely to be close to 5 hours when we get the new book for next year. And if we look down at that bottom left, that 85% number is the driver of that, is that audio moves with you everywhere throughout your day, whether it's the smart speaker in your kitchen, the speakers in your car, your headphones when you're outside. Audio provides something that allows it to move with consumers. And when we pull back and look at that from a performance media standpoint, that's how we drive conversions, right? The more we reach people in more places, the more we have the ability to bring our products out there. And that's going to ultimately lead to conversions. And that's what's made audio such a valuable performer in the performance media space, is because it moves everywhere with you. And one conjecture, to show sort of how those numbers have gotten so big is that podcast boom. And that will be something that Irena and I talk about, is how podcasting has really brought content creation directly into your pocket and in turn allowed you to bring these creators with you on whatever journey you're going on. Yeah, so just to piggyback on that is that, again, a lot of people, when they were talking about traditional radio, and I'll include that with AM and FM and Sirius to a certain extent, they would talk about it in terms of drive times and where you're trying to reach that audience when they were a captive audience in the car. That notion has been broken, and now this is a consumable medium that you're taking with you throughout your day, and it always has, whether you're in the car or listening through your headphones or a smart speaker, what have you, a very intimate one-on-one type of engagement with the listener. All right, but this is a good idea of, and I'm letting Willie walk through this, is that it is a complex ecosystem and has a lot of moving parts. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about that? Yeah, I think there was one of the notes on the previous slide was this war for attention. And I know I sort of touched on that, right? I think Matt Damon was recently doing an interview regarding his new movie, The Rip, and talking about how when they make movies for Netflix, they have to make them entirely different than they make movies in a movie theater. If I'm making a movie for a movie theater, I've got you in the movie theater and I can tell you the story, I have you locked in. But when they're making a Netflix movie, they've got to tell that story and the plot 5 times in the first 15 minutes or you're out the door. So this war for attention has opened up this idea of bringing content across this open ecosystem. And audio is one of those that allows you to do it, whether it's hearing music in Spotify or having a creator make a TikTok video or branching out into their Instagram and their social. Audio is truly that platform that allows you to go everywhere aside from a singular screen. And that war for attention, we sort of say it, right? We don't like to listen to multiple people talk at once. It's why shows like Crossfire didn't go well, and why people don't really like where news and sports discussions are going, because people are talking over each other. But audio allows you to stand out from that war of attention, and an open ecosystem like this is vital to being able to do that, because it allows audio to go wherever that consumer is going.
Right. And then we'll go one more. It's just talking about the gap between utilization and kind of the appreciation of audio versus other media, and why one of the words that you're going to hear us say a lot today is opportunity, and where that opportunity really lies for you as marketers if you're currently not utilizing audio, or if you're only using one aspect of audio, why there's untapped opportunity for you to be able to grow your brand.
Yeah, and this will sort of be the last sort of slide that I sort of touch on, but if there's one piece of information I want everybody in this room to take today, it's this slide right here. And this is the opportunity that we discovered with Southern New Hampshire and a lot of the partners that you saw on that second screen. When we look at time spent, audio is about 20 to 25% of our actual time spent of media. And we saw that with that 4 hours. But when you look at it from a media spend, it's less than 5%. So if you look at all the other media we consume, it's 90% or 80%, but it's being bought at a 90% clip. So there's an opportunity for brands to differentiate themselves in the audio space. In essence, other mediums are being overbought based on the time spent with them, while audio is being underbought based on the time spent with them. And that allows for efficient CPMs, efficient pricing, but ultimately reach that you can't reach in other places that's going to drive performance media. So when we talk today about what is the opportunity and how we built this partnership with SNHU, it's that opportunity. It was how do we differentiate ourselves in a space where we know that the audience is there, but it's not being utilized or purchased correctly. It does all make sense, right? When you look at it from that, that's the sort of one that when you go back to your brands and say, hey, where does this opportunity exist? That's the opportunity that we're going to try to drive home today.
Yep. So that being said, we're going to use that as an example because as Irena is here as the case study of an actual brand that is utilizing audio in an effective manner. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that odyssey? How did you, what first was it about audio that attracted you to giving a test? What was that first baby steps like? And what have you learned in that? What did you learn from that first experience?
Would love to. When I first joined SNHU, I came as a podcast listener, as a very loyal podcast listener. And one of the first questions was, why are we not in this space? So my mission from the very beginning was to try to get podcasts to as part of our medium and to test it. So over the past 4 years, I've worked with my team on trying to figure out how we make that happen, because we are traditionally on the linear side and the CTV side, and how do we figure out how to test this, how much of a budget to allocate to it, how do we measure this? There's so many questions, and where do you begin? And I began my journey with going to, one, just educating myself on what this medium is and partnering with amazing people like William to really learn that podcasting side and what it entails. Our journey with testing started with something like Run of Network, very easy, if you will, and a very transferable, where you can have a pre-recorded spot that can run and you can geo-target, demo-target, something we're very familiar with on the CTV side. And from there, looking at the results weren't really impressive. Let's try something else. And I think that was the biggest learning experience for us as direct response marketers of, let's try something, and if it doesn't work, let's not give it up. Let's try something else within the same space, and we turned to host reads. And that worked really well right from the beginning. And it's something that William and I have been working on over the past year and a half of figuring out what exactly works, whether it's the show, whether it's the genre, whether it's the host reads, whether it's the pre-recorded. Like, it's a learning journey for sure. And it's been one that, as you said, we're kind of a case study, a very successful one. I would say that partnering with the right publishers and understanding the medium and knowing that it's not like other mediums is, I think, crucial.
Yeah. William, when you have new advertisers that are coming into your spirit, like, how do you guys look at it in terms of where to direct them relative to these different options that are available to them, not just in terms of the podcast versus streaming versus Sirius, but also in terms of the canned approach versus a host approach or what have you? How do you guys look at that and figure out where the best path?
Yeah, I think the most important part when you guys look at it from the brand standpoint is understanding exactly how we're going to track it, what is the audience we're looking to reach, and then it's up for us to try to provide that recommendation for you, right? So when we pull back and you say, hey, I'm trying to reach a female, 35 years old, maybe a parent with an income, it's then on us to say, okay, where does that audience stay? Where does that audience live? And believe it or not, that audience lives heavily in true crime. I think 80% of true crime listening is female. Average age is 37. There's a running joke. If we ever want to know what happens on an episode of Dateline, it's likely the spouse, right? It's just we've learned this from over time. But we realize that, hey, if you want to reach this target, you're going to have to sit there and say, I'm okay being aligned with true crime. And that can be difficult for brands to want to directly associate with. And I think part of the learning process that we had with SNHU was saying, hey, people know what they're consuming. If I'm listening to Crime Junkie or Dateline, I know exactly what the content's going to be. I'm not going to affiliate SNHU with violence because it happens to be what that show is. And finding out exactly how the brand is comfortable is step one. Mm-hmm. Once we can find those genres or those shows that fit, then it's okay, how are we going to track this, right? If I'm listening to music on the treadmill while I'm running, I'm not stopping everything to go learn about SNHU at that time. But I may later down the road, and that's where attribution becomes incredibly vital to how performance media works in the audio space. And 5-6 years ago, you would have to, if let's say it was Dude Wipes, you'd have to text Dude Wipes to a number and then hope that somebody got back and Dude Wipes would turn into a conversion. Now we've been able to onboard all of the attribution partners that likely all of you are using on a video front, whether it's iSpot or Claritas or ArtsAI or whoever it may be. And next thing you know, you can put audio and video together on any dashboard and have an apples to apples comparison on how your video and your audio are working together to drive your media mix. And I think that that's ultimately the next step. And then the third is ensuring you have the right creative, right? If you don't have the right creative, it doesn't matter what you do or where you do it, it's not gonna work. And that's leaning into the shows and ensuring that you're putting together the right creative. When we look at a podcast standpoint, because that is the crux of the partnership that we have with SNHU, it's all about trust and authenticity, right? We partner a lot with Andy Cohen, and I use this example a ton. Andy Cohen is a tea drinker. He drinks more Bigelow tea than any man on this earth, I think. And Starbucks came to us and wanted to offer a big 7-figure deal to have Andy Cohen promote Starbucks. But Andy Cohen immediately knew that it would be inauthentic to his audience. They all knew he doesn't drink coffee. So that would immediately not work. And if we had taken that deal and forced Starbucks onto Andy Cohen, that would have been an unsuccessful campaign, right? So we have to find the perfect mix of an audience and aligning the proper shows, making sure that we have the right attribution in place, maintaining that authenticity and using the right creative. But that mix is really easy to put together and it's really cost efficient and it's not as scary or new as it sounds because audio, to Buck's point, is no longer a tertiary medium. It is a focal point of where creators and content is going. And that's allowed us to bring SNHU to the forefront because we've made SNHU authentic with these hosts, and then the attribution and the audience follows.
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on real quickly, because it's something that has also been kind of a stigma to traditional AM/FM radio going back now, is that a lot of where the highest levels of audience engagement were with traditional talk radio, and traditional talk radio tend to gravitate toward political talk, and one side of the spectrum dominated that political talk. So there started to be this notion of, if I'm going to be having Sean Hannity or Mark Levin or somebody voicing my spots, I'm going to be labeled with that political affiliation. Like my brand is now all of a sudden going to be affiliated with that. And that really, there was a lot of truth to that because it was kind of a live by and die by the sword, where you would get the benefit of that rabid fan who everything that came out of that host's mouth, they took as gospel, but there was also going to be polarization of people who looked at everything that was coming out of his mouth as, I'm not going to buy that because, so it's less true now, but that was always something that was, I just want to address it, that was always something that radio had, like as a pro and a con, that you were taking that into consideration when you were affiliating yourself with the host. So that said, let's talk a little bit about that creative. Irena, and your messaging for SNHU, how do you find that it has evolved relative to the other channels that you guys use. Like, how is the podcast messaging different from, or how do they synchronize with some of the other channels that you use from television and whatnot?
Yeah. So one of the things about podcasting that I absolutely love is the way that we can just do the scripts almost on the fly, if you will. Our creative department, which is in-house, gets so much on their plate from the different projects that we send their way, updating the creative, especially when it comes to video. It's a big job, right? They're traveling, they're shooting all of the footage, and they're working with our students and graduates to try to get the story and their story is told. For podcasts, we can tell that story in a much quicker and more authentic way because of the trust that was built between the host and the audience. And we know, like William said, where before we even partner with the show, my first question is, hey, is this an option? Does the host agree to talk about us in an authentic way? Because we do not want to partner with someone, and I'm sure it works the same way on their end, who doesn't believe in what we're doing, right? So with the creative, it's really easy to take the scripts and churn them really quickly, and most importantly, really customize them to fit not only the host and their preferences, like tea in the coffee story with Andy Cohen, but also what are the listeners into? What are they understand the host, but they obviously align with them on some level. So what is their priority? What do they care about? With education, is it that they are working full-time and they can't find a way to fit that in? So we talk about that. Is it that they have a family or they want a social life? So working with the hosts and really being able to create a very custom creative for each show. That I think is the biggest game changer. With pre-recorded in-house, it works great for just getting more of a reach and kind of scale, but aligning with the host and getting down to understanding what the audience is and tailoring to the creative to fit them and make them feel seen and heard is, I think, for podcasting, the biggest.
I think that's a really good point. And when you go to your point, Buck, and talking about, Sean Hannity per se, right? When I sold radio, we would just bring the read down. Here you go, bud. This is what's happening, and you're going to do it. And they would read it, and we would cross our fingers. When we bring these partnerships now to the host, it's their content. It's their show. And if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. And that immediately provides a gap that we've been able to close. And I think what we've done with SNHU, and I'll use Dateline as an example, when Keith Morrison does the read for Dateline, he's talking about, hey, are you interested in a life of crime or learning more about crime? And next thing you know, we're pushing the criminology courses. So there's a direct correlation between what program is going out and how it's going to relate to the listener who heard it. But when we advertise with Mel Robbins, we're talking maybe social sciences or other aspects or liberal arts. And we're in essence creating individual pieces of copy, not for an audience, but the demo in specific to the content that they're consuming. And having that podcast host drive that really creates that authenticity that ultimately drives conversions.
So I'll tell you a story about a similar. When I was approached by the guys at Beachbody years ago about the idea of doing radio, one of the things that came up was it's an infomercial, right? And their infomercial for P90X was very visual. And there was a lot of the before and afters and look at these hard bodies and all that kind of stuff. And it was flashy and beautiful, and everything about it was screamed infomercial. And so people were like, how are you going to make that work on radio? And what we ended up doing was actually taking it to the hosts and having the hosts say, well, I've seen the infomercial. I've been intrigued by it. I'm actually going to do it. And so they documented their journey for their audience. And one of the things that we learned is you should never do that when they haven't done it for at least a month, because there's a lot of pain and they're mostly complaining through the commercial, like, I am in so much pain I can't move my arms up. But other than that learning curve, it brought an authenticity to this methodology that otherwise was so slick and was so pre-produced that now all of a sudden it went out of the realm of being pretty and packaged to real. Like, this is Mike and Mike talking about how they're actually feeling like they're getting in the best shape of their life and being willing to do workouts with Tony Horton and do all these kind of things. I flash forward now to a campaign that we have on the air right now. It's for a product called Muddy Mat, which Muddy Mat does a lot on television and social media and digital and whatnot. And if you look at the video, it looks almost too good to be true, right? I mean, like, oh my gosh, how can that really work that well? Well, once again, come bring in the audio, and the audio comes in to say, you've probably seen those ads. I have. I thought that's too good to be true. I'm validating it does exactly what it says it's doing. Like, I'm the proof of the pudding. I'm the trust. And I'm now going to validate that that isn't just some slick marketing campaign. It's the real deal. And so these things work really well with each other as a way of being able to, a different version of the message, but a complementary one. So that being said, a question for you, Irena, as well as William, and your different takes on it. So in your case, TV preceded audio, but are there certain things that you ever test where you say, let's test that with audio and or podcast first, and maybe incorporate that into TV later? So how does the tail and the dog work as far as that's concerned?
We utilize that with looking at different degrees specifically. So it's a little bit harder on the TV side, where obviously it's a lot bigger of a production to record all of these ads for different programs. We've got 250 plus, so it would be a bit of a lift. So with podcasts, it was perfect because, like I said, we can get the scripts out pretty quickly, and we can tailor them to, for example, for true crime, looking at the criminology, just looking at like what are the degrees and tailoring to that show. And we were able to do that before. We're thinking about doing that for the TV side as well. But right now, because it's so easy, we can test it on the podcast side. And with like education or any of the other degrees that we have in the programs, we can test using different genres. With Mel Robbins, she's all about motivation, working yourself, improving yourself. Well, how does that fit with our creative? And that's an easy way to test right there, because she's so good at what she does. So that's been one of the best examples, I think, just looking at different degrees and programs that we have.
And William, do you typically find that most people that you're engaging with are either they're already established in another medium and audio is an add-on, or audio may be the tip of the spear that they're using to be able to try and learn about the marketplace?
I think it's a bit of a mix, to be honest with you, at this point. I think the thing that's really drawing a much more robust audio conversation is the fact that it's the content creators direct, right? And want to bring back the true crime with SNHU specifically. And don't hold me to the numbers, because I remember when we did this, but I want to say leads were up exponentially on the criminology portion of it once we started to tailor creative specifically to those criminology programs. Well, that immediately allows us to say, okay, it may be worth making video with criminology specific video to run on our CTV portions. So in essence, that learning from podcasting first allows them to now take something to video, when conversely for the past few years it's all been opposite, right? It's been taking that video and then how can we extend it or use the reach and the power that audio reach has. But now we're actually seeing case-by-case studies where you can get specific on creative, and it may be worth, even though the production leeway is much longer and there's higher costs, to actually have these specific messages on video. And I think audio has done a great job to expose that in a good way.
Yeah, I always think about one of our clients for many years was Navage, and Navage had come to us as an established TV campaign. So they had been doing TV for quite a long time, and the creator of the product, who was if you've ever knew him, was a very entrepreneurial guy, really loved that radio gave him the ability to test a lot of different things very quickly, that we could in a couple of weeks be turning around. And eventually the dog, which had been television and radio was the tail, switched positions, and radio actually became the laboratory where we created a lot of the new messaging that then got converted into the new TV commercials. So I think it's important I always like to add, sometimes people want to test audio first before they go into the studio and do something for TV. That works. Sometimes they're already on TV, they want to run radio in concert with that. That also works. Sometimes they might have tested something on TV and it didn't work at all, and they think, well, okay, what could we do to try and recoup some of that? Sometimes there's a whole new life, like the phoenix rising from the ashes in audio. So I really encourage everybody, if there's one takeaway here, is not to think of it just linearly in terms of there's only one place where it fits into that equation, but that it's very fluid and it can be able to suit whatever purpose it needs to be able to either complement or be the kind of the beachhead for a new campaign.
I think it's a great point, too, Buck, because when we're looking for performance marketing, right, it's all about the cost per. It's how do we get the lowest conversion cost possible and drive that as much as we can. And if you have high production costs, no matter what, it's going to bring that cost per up. And audio allows you to move on the fly and make new creative quickly and test new channels and do it cost efficiently. So when I look around this room and I say, hey, every one of you is trying to drive a performance campaign and ultimately drive conversions, it's the perfect place for you to test because you can test multiple pieces of creative, have them back in 2 to 3 business days, have exactly what you need in a way that's not going to burden you with high overhead costs. And the lower the overhead costs, the more money you can actually spend on media driving those conversions. And that's what's been a bit of a game changer as well, because a lot of performance marketers have come to us and said, hey, I don't have to buy a $50,000 commercial to do this. Production's included. I'm getting the talent. I'm getting the show. And we know the audience is there. We know that there's a massive overlap in audience between these. Everybody in this room consumes audio and video. And it's just understanding that we purchase the same way.
So let's go into that in more depth. Irena, what do you typically look at as what your testing budget and or testing methodology, timeline, and everything else for launching something new in audio?
Well, initially, this was a very new medium to us, so we did not have a budget dedicated to this. And I think I was off. And looking at how do we test it without having a dedicated budget was the first hurdle, right? So we looked at where can we take away from the other sides, from linear, from CTV, just enough to test it to really see if we can move the needle. And from our perspective, it could have been 5%. That's all we needed just to dip our toes long enough. And long enough is generally, I think up to 3 months is probably a good estimate to see really solid results. 6 to 8 weeks is probably minimum, I would say, but 3 months gives you a good timeline. Obviously, the longer the better, right, William?
I think a little of that too is also how long-winded or how long tail the conversion item is. Education has a much longer tail because it's a high cost. So I think there's some nuances there as well, but specific to education, I would echo that entirely.
For us, it's been about 3 months to see, to really get a good understanding of results, and looking at anywhere between 5 to 10% of your budget is kind of a good place to start. Obviously, if it works, then this is where I am now, trying to establish this as its separate medium and get a separate budget for it. So it's a medium that absolutely worked for us, and I hope to grow it to a point that we can have a solid budget. And I know that you're going to be happy about that, but it's really, and it takes time, right? This did not happen overnight and did not happen in 3 months. It's been a journey since I joined several years ago, and in the past about a couple of years, maybe a year and a half, that we've started really diving in and testing random network and seeing, did that work, did it not work? Okay, well, if that doesn't work, what else can we try? And not giving up on it, because as a listener, as a loyal podcast listener, I didn't want to give up, because I know the joy that I get as a marketer, knowing, and as a marketer and as a listener, listening to a show and hearing, for example, Mel Robbins, hearing her talk about something I do day to day, that is the biggest gratification I can get. So as far as, and kind of went off on a tangent there, but as far as the budget and timeliness, it's really custom to the brand itself and the goals that you have as well. But anywhere, I would say 5 to 10% of the budget, with give it 3 to 6 months at least, and then try something different if that didn't work, because it's dependent on the show and the genre, on what your goals are too. So it's not a one size fits all.
I think a simple way to look at it too is if you go back to that mind the gap slide, right? And if it's 80% of consumption's here and 20% of consumption's there, it's probably a decent place for you to start on how you want to allocate some budgets, right? And even if you want to do half of that, it's still north of where the actual spends are currently, but it's an easy way for you to sit there and say, hey, if 80% of my consumption's here, it's probably a good place to put 80% of my budget, and the 20% of my consumption's here, it's probably a good place to put 20% of your budget. And then it's on us as the vendor or the publisher to determine what that share of voice is. And for those familiar with share of voice in this room, it's how much of a share of that show is going to a singular advertiser. And that's generally how we do everything on a podcast side, a little bit different than radio. Radio is driven on, reach, frequency, and all of that. We don't have that on a podcast side because it's download based. But what share of that voice are we gonna get, and what is the baseline for where we see that work? And we know that about 5% is the baseline of that. And if we have a 5% share of voice within a show, we know that we're gonna unlock the scale to ultimately drive conversions. Now, a show with 25 million downloads a month versus a show with 1 million downloads a month, that 5% cost is significantly different. And that's where you gotta find the mix between the audiences. But when you guys sit there with the budgets that you have, I would look at where the consumption is, and then ultimately find the places that it fits, find the demos, find the audience, and then try to back into some share voices. And if those are above the benchmarks that your publisher partners should provide you, then you'll know you're at least testing with the right foot forward versus just trying to throw stuff at a wall and hoping that it sticks.
Okay.
And if there are any questions on that, I would love to answer them, but I know it can be a nuance.
Yeah, and we're in our last 10 minutes here, so we're going to kind of do a couple rapid fires, and then we'll throw it out. If there's any other questions for the audience, please let us know, because otherwise I'm just going to keep driving the bus here. To William, why do most audio campaigns fail?
Why do most audio campaigns fail? This will be a little longer than rapid fire, but I'll do it quick. Excuse my language, but shitty creative is number one. Avoid that at all costs. And then ultimately the wrong attribution, right? Audio is not a last click medium. Just always think about how you consume it. And it's not gonna be my last click. And if that's determined as the attribution, then yes, it's gonna fail. You need pixels, you need to have it fire, you find the right look back window, and that's for you all determined. It's, hey, I want an action within 6 hours and a 3-day look back, or 24 hours and a 30-day look back. But ultimately, if you have the right attribution, you will at least know if the campaign is driving in the direction you want it to. But yeah, those would be the big two for me.
And to you, Irena, what was the biggest aha moment that you had to kind of see and understand that how to get audio to work for you?
I think the biggest difference with podcasting specifically is understanding the authenticity that comes with each host and the level of trust that they create with their audience, with their listeners. It's almost like a personal endorsement that you're listening to someone that you trust so deeply that you almost consider them a friend or a trusted resource. You turn to them for advice and the random things that they recommend that you believe, and you've never met this person. It's kind of incredible, a little bit maybe scary, but also fascinating to, as a listener too. I believe pretty much everything Mel tells me. So that was the biggest aha moment for us, of understanding that authenticity and really how do we make that work for us, and how do we create creative and scripts that cater to that as well.
No. And I would just quickly throw out that one of the things that somebody asked me the other day, like, what do you look as a conversation starter for when you come to things like this? And I say, I like to try to find the person that goes, oh, I did radio and it didn't work. Because that's like saying hello to me, right? Like, I'm like, okay, sure, let's get it. And 9 times out of 10, when you have that conversation, it's immediately apparent why it didn't work. But that marketer's notion is that the medium somehow failed, not their methodology failed. Not that they did it wrong, but somehow the medium as a whole has no viability. And again, the results just show you, with hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of direct products sold via radio, that is not the case. It's not the medium. It's how are you utilizing the medium. And I think that that's really a huge takeaway, is the ability for the marketer to look in the mirror and say, what are we doing wrong, and how do we need to do it right in order to be able to get this medium to be able to produce in a way that not only stands on its own, and that's one of the things that we as an agency are constantly talking to our client about, is like, that audio needs to stand on its own. It has to have its own positive ROI. But also, how is it benefiting everything else, the entire campaign? And that's where we come back into that trust and other ways that you can be able to utilize it to tell your story in a different way than maybe other channels don't allow you. All right, let's see, what else? So you're talking a lot about podcasts. Obviously, within the Sirius ecosystem, there's podcasts as a piece of that, but it's not the only piece of that. How do you really differentiate between the Sirius satellite, we'll call it the broadcast side, versus the streaming, the Pandora side, which you traditionally came from, versus the podcast?
Yeah, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm just raving about podcasts and not radio, right? Podcast is just the next iteration of radio. You fall in love with the hosts, you listen to Mike and the Mad Dog. It's the same theory, right? And I think for us, when we look at it from a SiriusXM standpoint, it's is it national? Are you looking for host alignment? Are you looking for specific demos? Are there geos involved? And if it's geo-targeted and we don't want host alignment, then it may be efficient streaming. Or maybe, hey, we want host alignment with the lowest CPM on the national level, or then we're gonna see what we can do on satellite. Or it may be, hey, we really wanna have alignment with specific hosts and specific shows. And ultimately, we'll try to determine what your target is and then the best way and most efficient way to do that, whether it's a guaranteed media, remnant inventory, whatever that is, but there's a lane for every one of those aspects of audio. And I think when we look at it, we have 180 million people who listen a month across satellite, all the podcast offerings and streaming. And that's driven because we don't care where you are as long as you're consuming audio. And we will then try to find the lane that's correct for whatever brand it is. And I think that that's the biggest part is relying on the people who know it, right? And letting them provide you the mix and then determining what works, optimizing, moving, switching, and adjusting on the fly. And audio allows you to do that, right? Like we can pause something and green light something in an hour with audio, and we can have new creative done. And that, from a performance standpoint, is vital because you don't get too far behind the 8 ball.
No. Any questions from the audience? There's one.
Yep. How you doing? Michael Weinstein with Jam Direct. This was great, by the way. Thank you very much. Super informative. Question, you mentioned attribution a few times. You've had attribution partners and different methodologies, but in terms of best practices for CTAs, whether radio or any type of audio, has anything changed? Are we still doing enter discount code, PDMI, or unique URL? Any advances or different recommendations you have as we look at testing?
Yeah, we have, I mean, they all still get used, right? Like, I don't think many people use vanity URLs until you realize some people use vanity URLs. So it's not a terrible to have it in there. We were shocked with how many people are actually putting in snhu.edu/Dateline. Like, blew our minds how many people did it. So I think that's vital. Yeah, they're all still being used. I think from a true way to truly learn it is you have to pixel these things at this point. And the pixel fires when the impression fires, and if no action is taken, then there's no further data. But if action is taken, that's truly it. But I also think it depends what it is you're pushing, right? If it's a form fill, if it's 3 pages down on a lead fill form, if it's a coupon, those things all really vary. And that's also vital to sit down. We have a whole production arm, and every single partner that you publish or partner with will have it. And it should be up to them. So we'll bring Studio Resonate, which is our production arm, and we would come in and say, hey, we have this much time. Which of these do you recommend? And we'll see which one performs best. And you can also run multiple, a joy of audio, right? We can have a vanity URL, we can have a text code, we can have just standard. And then if one outperforms the other, I know that's not the best answer because there isn't a specific to it, but they all still get used. And it really just comes down to what you're willing to expose on the back end. We have clients who won't place pixels. They don't want them on the page, even though they're not JavaScript and they won't slow down anything. They just don't want to do it. So we have to rely on other measurement forms. And that balance is just finding the right middle ground between the partner and the publisher.
Yeah, can I just answer that? And I'm going to answer it very honestly. It's really hard. It's really hard. And you can get a lot of false reads. And I say that very candidly because a lot of people will say to me, oh my gosh, my podcasts are blowing up because we're using and they don't realize that the codes that they're using are just getting auto-populated by honey and things, and it's giving that attribution credit to have nothing to do with the podcast. It's just, it got swept up in there and used, disseminated across the web. And so it's hard to gauge that as gospel, right? One of our big things, and this is just a best practice that we like to utilize, is to be able to say, let's look at what your consumer's behavior is now, right? So if you're selling a product and 5% or 15% of your traffic is going to your direct URL and 85% is going to Amazon, don't think in your radio creative that you're gonna change that. So just tell them to go to Amazon and tell them what to do when they get to Amazon. So search for Active Liver by New Nordic at Amazon. so that they don't, and again, they're gonna do that anyway. Make it so that you can try and be able to see that it's actually gonna provide that traction. Back in the back.
Hi, Sam Gorwitz. Thank you very much, Buck. Always great to see you. I built a beauty line for a celebrity family, but the founder is not a celebrity. So we're competing against Kylie and every other brand out there. Is there a play for beauty in audio? This is a lip care related type beauty system, lip gloss, everything that goes with lips. So love to hear something about it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's I would say it's massive. I think, and it's important to understand the demo on that, right? And I'm assuming it's a younger target. You mentioned Kylie. I'm assuming it's a younger target. Yeah, that's an Alex Cooper play. That's Call Her Daddy. That's Rotten Mango, Stephanie Sue. That's having those hosts literally try your brand, endorse it, and it would blow you away how successful it would be. So the minute you're in essence making them the celebrity for you, right? So if Alex Cooper on Call Her Daddy is telling all her daddy acts to go ahead and try this makeup, yeah, that's a pretty common way to do it, because again, it bridges the gap between having an actual celebrity endorser or just acting as an endorser in whatever media they're consuming. So that would be one of the first places I would recommend for you, truly, because I think it allows you to have that celebrity alignment without the cost behind that celebrity alignment. Definitely.
Anyone? One more if you want it. All right, I'm going to take it. Favorite podcast?
Dateline, man.
Diary of a CEO.
Huberman.
All right, that was good. Rapid fire answers. How about what was that? What about me?
Yeah.
60 songs that explain the 90s, which is now about 160 songs from the 90s and 2000s, but I love that show. Amazing show. Anyway, round of applause for everybody.
Thank you.